The Last Sunset, a tale of survival and courage. The world was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that followed destruction. Once, there had been laughter in the valleys, markets filled with chatter, and the hum of life carried by the wind. But now, the air was heavy with smoke and the taste of ash. The sky was painted in deep orange and red, the last rays of the sun stretching across the broken earth like dying embers. No one knew if they would ever see another dawn. Aiden stood on the edge of a shattered cliff, his clothes torn, his face streaked with dust and exhaustion. His eyes were fixed on the fading sun. For him, the sunset was more than just the end of a day. It was the reminder of everything he had lost. Behind him lay the ruins of what used to be his home, now nothing more than twisted metal and crumbling stone. He took a slow breath, his ribs aching. The backpack on his shoulder felt heavier than ever, though it carried only a few things: a cracked water bottle, a piece of bread, a map, and a photograph of his family. The faces in the photos smiled brightly, frozen in a moment of peace that no longer existed. His wife, Lena, and their daughter, Elara, gone in the firestorm that swallowed the city 3 weeks ago. Aiden had promised Elara once, "I'll always find a way to keep you safe." The memory of her laughter haunted him now. He couldn't keep that promise, but maybe he thought he could keep another, to survive. The war had ended, but not in victory. The bombs had stopped falling because there was nothing left to destroy. The sun itself seemed to burn weaker each day, hidden behind a veil of smoke and dust that dimmed its light. The scientists had warned of this: too much destruction, too much pollution. The atmosphere was dying. The world was losing its light. Aiden started walking. He had to reach the mountain range in the north before nightfall. Rumors said there was a community there, a small group of survivors who had managed to rebuild something close to a home. Whether it was true or not, he had to find out. Hope, even false hope, was better than despair. The wind howled softly through the broken trees as he made his way down the rocky path. Every sound felt amplified in the emptiness. The crunch of gravel beneath his boots echoed like thunder. He passed the remains of an old car, half buried in dirt. Its windows were smashed, and inside, a rusted teddy bear sat on the dashboard. He looked away quickly, his throat tightening. By the time he reached the forest edge, the light had dimmed to a dull red glow. Shadows stretched long and cold. He knew he couldn't travel at night. It was too dangerous. There were no animals left, only desperate men who scavenged in the darkness, driven mad by hunger and loss. Aiden had seen what they could do. He found a hollow beneath the roots of a massive oak tree and crawled inside. The ground was damp, but it was shelter. He pulled his jacket tight and took a sip of water. The liquid was warm, but it soothed his dry throat. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Food had become a luxury he could no longer afford to think about. As the first stars appeared, faint and trembling through the smoky haze, Aiden lay on his back and closed his eyes. His body screamed for rest, but his mind wandered. He thought about Lena's voice, soft and calm, telling stories to Elara at bedtime. He could almost hear it now, carried faintly in the whisper of the wind. "Someday," she used to say, "when the world grows quiet, you'll hear the earth breathe again. You'll see the sun rise after the longest night." He wanted to believe that. But as he looked at the dying sky, it was hard to imagine any sunrise after this. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence, a rustle in the leaves nearby. Aiden froze. His hand instinctively reached for the knife at his belt. The noise came again, closer this time. His heart pounded. Was it an animal? Or someone worse? He waited, barely breathing. Then, through the shadows, a small figure emerged. It was a child, a girl, no older than 10, her face streaked with dirt, her eyes wide and scared. She clutched a small metal canister to her chest like it was treasure. Aiden lowered his knife slowly. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl didn't answer. She just stared at him, trembling. Aiden noticed her lips were cracked and dry. She hadn't had water in days. Carefully, he took out his bottle and offered it to her.
"Here.
Take it." For a moment, she hesitated. Then, she stepped closer and grabbed it, drinking greedily. When she finished, she looked up at him again, as if waiting for him to take it back. "What's your name?" he asked. She whispered something so quietly, he almost didn't hear it. "Mira." "Mira," he repeated with a small nod. "I'm Aiden." She didn't say anything else, just sat beside him, hugging her knees. He noticed the canister again and asked, "What's that you've got there?" Mira looked down at it, her fingers tightening around it. "It's the last seed," she said. Aiden frowned. "A seed?" She nodded. "My mother said it's from before the fires. From a tree that used to grow in the old forests. She said if I can find a place where the sun still shines, I should plant it." Aiden stared at her, stunned. A single seed, something so small, yet carrying so much hope. He didn't know if such a place existed anymore. But seeing the determination in the little girl's eyes stirred something inside him, a spark he thought had died long ago. He smiled faintly. "Then we'll find that place, Mira." She looked at him doubtfully. "You'll help me?" "Yes," he said simply. "We'll find the sunlight together." Outside, the wind whispered through the broken forest like a ghostly song. Above them, the last light of the sun faded, leaving the world in deep shadow. The night had come, but for the first time in weeks, Aiden didn't feel entirely alone. Somewhere in the distance, lightning flashed over the mountains. The storm was coming, and with it new dangers. But also, maybe, a new beginning. And so began their journey. Two souls in a dying world, walking toward the faint promise of light. The morning came quietly, though the sun never fully appeared. A dull orange glow pressed weakly through the thick layer of dust hanging in the sky. Aiden and Mira stood at the edge of the forest, ready to move again. The air smelled faintly of smoke and iron, and a cold wind brushed against their faces. Aiden adjusted the straps of his backpack and glanced at the horizon. "If we keep heading north, we might reach the mountains in 2 days," he said. "There should be cleaner air there, maybe even water." Mira nodded but said nothing. She was still shy, her small hands clutching the metal canister tightly. Aiden could tell she was afraid of the silence, of being alone again, of the world that no longer felt safe. They began walking along the old road, cracked and overgrown with weeds. The world around them was a graveyard of memories, burnt houses, rusted cars, and the skeletons of trees that once gave shade. The wind blew through the ruins, carrying with it faint echoes of laughter, the ghosts of a time long gone. After an hour of walking, Mira broke the silence. "Do you think the sun will ever shine again?" she asked softly. Aiden looked down at her, unsure how to answer. "Maybe," he said after a moment. "The world has a way of healing itself, even after everything we've done to it." Mira looked up at the sky. "Mama used to say the sun never really dies. It just hides until we deserve it again." Aiden smiled faintly. "Your mama was wise." They continued walking until midday. The heat pressed down on them, though it wasn't the warmth of life. It was the dry, suffocating kind that made every breath taste like dust. Aiden's throat burned, and he rationed the last few drops of water between them. They had to find more soon. By late afternoon, they reached a small settlement, or what was left of it. The place had been burned long ago, but some of the buildings still stood. Aiden stopped Mira before they entered. "Stay close to me," he warned. "We don't know who might still be here." They stepped cautiously through the remains. Broken glass crunched under their feet. Signs of struggle were everywhere. Burnt furniture, shattered doors, old bullet holes. The silence was heavy. Inside one of the houses, Aiden found a rusted tin can still sealed. He opened it carefully. The smell was foul, but a few pieces were edible. Mira wrinkled her nose but ate slowly, her hunger stronger than her fear. They found a working hand pump behind the building. The water was muddy, but after filtering it through a piece of Aiden's shirt, it was drinkable. They drank deeply, feeling the life return to their dry bodies. For a while, it felt almost peaceful, until Aiden heard it. Footsteps. Heavy ones. He motioned for Mira to stay silent and crouch low. The sound came from the main road, 2, maybe 3 people. He peeked through a cracked window and saw them. Men, armed with makeshift weapons, walking with the rough confidence of scavengers. Their faces were hard and cruel, their clothes torn and dirty. Aiden whispered, "We have to go."
Now.
Myra's eyes widened, but she obeyed. They slipped quietly out the back and ran through the tall weeds toward the forest. But one of the men turned suddenly, catching a glimpse of movement. "Hey, over there!" Shouts rang out, followed by the pounding of boots. Aiden grabbed Myra's hand and pulled her through the trees. Branches whipped against their faces, roots tangled their feet, but they didn't stop. Behind them, the men cursed and followed. Aiden's lungs burned. He turned sharply down a slope, dragging Mira with him. They stumbled into a narrow ravine and pressed against the rocks. The men's voices grew louder for a moment, then faded as they passed overhead. They waited in silence, hardly daring to breathe. The minutes stretched endlessly before Aiden finally whispered, "They're gone." Mira clung to him, shaking. He put a hand on her shoulder. "It's all right. We're safe now." When she finally calmed, she looked up at him. "Why were they chasing us?" "Because the world makes people desperate," Aiden said quietly. "And desperate people forget what's right." They stayed in the ravine until nightfall. The sky was darker than before, the stars hidden behind clouds of ash. Aiden built a small fire using dry bark and sticks. The flame flickered weakly, casting trembling light on their tired faces. Mira sat close to the fire, holding the canister in her lap. "Do you think they'll find us again?" "No," Aiden said. "Not if we keep moving by dawn." She nodded, then looked at the small flame. "I wish we could make the world bright again." Aiden stared into the fire. "So do I," he whispered. "Maybe that's why we're still here, to bring a little light back." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire cracked softly. The forest around them was silent except for the distant moan of the wind. Later, when Mira fell asleep, Aiden sat awake, staring at the horizon. Somewhere beyond the mountains, he hoped, there was still a place where the sun touched the earth. Maybe it was just a story, but he had to believe in something. He looked down at the girl sleeping beside him, her small hands still clutching the last seed of the old world. She was the last flicker of innocence left in the ashes of humanity. He made a quiet promise to himself. "I will get her there, no matter what." The wind blew again, whispering through the trees like a voice from long ago, soft, distant, and filled with sorrow. Above them, the clouds shifted slightly, and for a brief moment, a single star shone through. Aiden looked at it and smiled faintly. It was small, but it was still shining. Dawn arrived slowly, with the same dim orange haze hanging over the horizon. The light was weak, filtered through the thick dust that never seemed to clear. Aiden woke first. His body ached from sleeping on the hard ground, but he pushed himself up quietly, not wanting to disturb Mira. The fire had burned out, leaving only a faint curl of smoke. He scanned the forest around them. It was eerily still, the kind of stillness that made every sound echo louder than it should. No birds. No insects. Just the whisper of wind through dead branches. Aiden stretched and looked at Mira. She was curled up under his jacket, clutching the canister close to her chest. Even in sleep, she didn't let it go. The last seed, she had called it. It was strange how something so small could mean so much. Maybe that seed was the only hope left for the world. When Mira finally stirred, Aiden smiled faintly. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said softly. She rubbed her eyes. "Is it morning? It doesn't look like it." He nodded. "It's hard to tell these days. But yes, it is." He handed her a small piece of bread, dry, but still edible.
"Eat this.
We've got a long walk ahead." They packed their few belongings and started moving north again. The path grew steeper, the ground harder with each step. The air was getting colder too, a sign that they were nearing the mountains. But cold meant clean air, less smoke, maybe even clearer skies. Aiden took it as a good sign. By midday, they reached an abandoned road cutting through the foothills. Aiden stopped to catch his breath and looked around. In the distance, he saw the faint outline of metal structures, perhaps remnants of an old power station. He thought there might be supplies there. "Mira," he said, pointing ahead. "We'll rest there." They walked carefully toward the station. The metal towers loomed above them like skeletons from another age. Most were collapsed, tangled in vines and rust. The silence was heavy here too, but something about the place felt watched. Inside the crumbling main building, Aiden found a few rusted cans, some old wires, and, miraculously, a working flashlight. He clicked it on, and a soft white beam cut through the shadows. Myra's eyes widened. "It still works," she whispered. "Guess we got lucky," Aiden said, smiling. "This will help us tonight." They explored the place a little longer, finding an old locker room where they could rest. Aiden checked every corner before letting Mira sit down. Trust was a rare thing now, and safety was never guaranteed. Mira traced shapes on the dusty floor. "Did you ever have a home?" she asked suddenly. Aiden paused.
Yes.
"I had a house. A wife. A little girl." She looked up at him. What happened to them? His throat tightened, but he didn't look away. The fires took them. When the bombs fell, there wasn't time to run. Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "I'm sorry." He nodded. "Me too." They sat in silence for a while. Then, trying to change the mood, Aiden said, "Tell me about your mother." Myra's face softened. She was a gardener. She loved plants. Even when everything started dying, she kept a small garden behind her house. She said the earth needed kindness, just like people do. Aiden smiled faintly. "She sounds like someone who believed in hope."
She did, Mira said.
"That's why she gave me the seed. She said one day, I'd find a place where it could grow again." Aiden stared at the cracked wall ahead of him. "Then, that's what we'll do. We'll find that place." That night, they stayed inside the old station. The flashlight glowed dimly beside them, casting a circle of light. Outside, the wind howled, carrying distant sounds, metal clanging, something shifting in the dark. Aiden's instincts tensed. He stood up slowly, listening. Mira looked up, frightened. "What is it?" "Stay quiet," he whispered. The noise came again, closer now. Footsteps. Aiden turned off the flashlight, plunging them into darkness. He reached for his knife and moved toward the door. A shadow passed by the window. Then a voice, a low, harsh whisper. "I told you I saw someone come in here." Aiden's heart pounded. It was the same scavengers from before. He motioned for Mira to hide behind the lockers. She crawled away silently, clutching her canister. Aiden pressed himself against the wall near the door, his breath shallow. The door creaked open. 2 men stepped inside, flashlights sweeping the room. Their boots echoed on the concrete floor. "See anything?" one muttered. "Maybe they moved upstairs," the other said. Aiden waited until both lights turned away, then slipped quietly toward the far hall. His only thought was get Mira out. But the floor betrayed him, a sharp creak of metal beneath his foot. Both men spun around instantly. "There! He's here!" They rushed toward him. Aiden bolted down the hall, shouting, "Run, Mira! Go!" Mira screamed his name, but she obeyed. She darted through a side door and disappeared into the shadows. Aiden turned sharply and swung the knife at the first man who lunged at him. The blade caught his arm, and the man cried out. The second attacker grabbed Aiden by the shoulder, slamming him against the wall. Pain shot through his ribs, but Aiden fought back fiercely. Desperation gave him strength. He punched, kicked, and finally broke free, sprinting toward the door. He stumbled outside into the cold night air. "Mira!" he shouted. "Here!" Her voice came from behind a fallen tower. He ran toward her just as the men burst through the doorway behind him.
"Go!" he yelled.
They ran together down the hill, the sound of angry voices echoing behind them. Bullets whistled past in the dark, hitting metal and rock. Aiden pulled Mira close, shielding her as they ducked into the trees. For a long time they ran until their legs could carry them no further. Finally, when the sounds of pursuit faded, they collapsed beside a stream, gasping for air. Aiden's arm was bleeding. Mira tore a piece of her sleeve and tied it around the wound, her small hands trembling. "You're hurt," she whispered. "I'll live," he said with a pained smile. "You did good, Mira. You ran when I told you to." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I thought they'd catch you."
"They didn't," he said.
"We're still here. That's what matters." They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the faint trickle of water. Above them, the clouds shifted slightly, revealing a faint patch of pale moonlight. It reflected on the stream, silver and calm. Mira looked up. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Aiden followed her gaze. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." For the first time in weeks, he felt something stir inside him, a fragile sense of peace. The world might be broken, but there were still moments like this. Still light. Still hope. As he looked at Mira, holding the precious canister to her heart, he thought, maybe the last sunset doesn't mean the end. Maybe it means the beginning of something new. And as the cold wind brushed against them, the two survivors sat together beneath the dim sky, unaware that greater trials still waited ahead, trials that would test not just their strength, but their faith in the light that refused to die. Morning broke with a faint shimmer of pale light, the kind that barely touched the earth through the heavy clouds. Aiden woke to the sound of water trickling nearby. The stream they had found the night before glimmered faintly under the gray sky. For a moment he simply sat still listening to it. It had been so long since he'd heard the peaceful sound of flowing water, it almost felt like the earth was whispering a lullaby. Mira stirred beside him, rubbing her eyes. Her face was pale and tired, but when she saw Aiden awake, she smiled weakly. "Are we safe now?" she asked. Aiden nodded.
"For now, yes."
"The mountains are close. If we keep moving, we might reach the ridge by nightfall." He checked his arm. The bandage Mira had tied held well, though the wound still burned. He didn't tell her how bad it hurt. There was no reason to worry her. They both needed to stay strong. After a small meal of dry bread, they followed the stream north. The air grew colder with every step. The trees thinned out, giving way to rocky slopes and bare ground. It was harder to walk now, but Aiden could see the faint outline of snow at the higher peaks. Somewhere up there, he hoped, there was still a place untouched by the firestorms, a place where life might begin again. By midday, clouds gathered overhead, dark and heavy. Thunder rumbled far away. A storm was coming. Aiden looked up uneasily. "We need shelter before the rain starts." They quickened their pace, climbing higher into the foothills. The wind grew stronger, pushing against them. Mira struggled to keep up, her small legs slipping on the stones, but Aiden took her hand and helped her along. Finally, they found a small cave hidden in the side of a cliff. It wasn't deep, but it would keep them dry. As soon as they stepped inside, the rain began to fall, heavy and relentless. The sound of it echoed through the mountains like distant applause. Mira sat near the entrance, watching the raindrops splash on the rocks. "It sounds like music," she said softly. Aiden smiled faintly. "It does. The world still remembers how to sing." He gathered a few dry sticks from inside the cave and managed to start a small fire. The flames danced weakly, but the warmth felt like a blessing. Mira held her hands near it, her eyes glowing in the flickering light. For a while, they rested in silence, listening to the rhythm of the rain. Then Mira spoke, her voice thoughtful. "Do you think there are other people out there? Like us?" Aiden looked into the fire. "Maybe. The world's big. There could be others trying to survive, just like we are." "Do you think they'll ever rebuild everything? The cities, the houses?" He hesitated. "Maybe not the same way. But people always find a way to start again. Even after everything's gone, they find hope in something new." Mira was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Maybe the seed will help." Aiden looked at her and nodded. "Maybe it will." The storm lasted all night. When morning came, the air was cleaner. For the first time in months, the sun broke faintly through the clouds, weak but golden. It touched the mountains with a soft glow, making the wet rocks shimmer. Mira ran to the cave's edge, gasping. "Aiden, look." He stepped beside her, stunned. The world below was washed clean. The The trees glistened with droplets, and patches of green peeked through the soil, tiny sprouts that had survived beneath the ashes. Life, fragile and new. He knelt down beside her. You see that, Mira? The world's not giving up. She smiled. Then neither should we. They left the cave and began climbing higher. The path was narrow and steep, but the light seemed to guide them. Every step forward felt like a small victory. As they reached the ridge, Aiden stopped to catch his breath and froze. In the valley beyond, nestled between two cliffs, was smoke, thin, gray, and rising straight into the air. It wasn't the dark smoke of destruction. It was cooking smoke. Mira saw it too. People, she whispered. Maybe, Aiden said. Let's find out. They descended carefully into the valley. The closer they got, the clearer the signs became. Footprints in the mud, the remains of a campfire, and even the faint sound of voices. Aiden motioned for Mira to stay behind him as they approached. Then, from behind a boulder, a figure appeared, an older man with a gray beard, holding a crossbow. Stop right there, the man shouted. Who are you? Aiden raised his hands. We're not here to fight, he said calmly. We're just travelers looking for shelter. The man's eyes narrowed. Travelers don't last long out here. Maybe not, Aiden replied, but we've made it this far. For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then another voice called out from behind the old man, a woman's voice. Elias, lower your weapon. They have a child. The man hesitated, then slowly lowered the crossbow. A woman stepped forward, her clothes patched but clean, her face kind despite the tiredness in her eyes. Come, she said softly. You look like you could use food and warmth. Aiden nodded, relief washing over him. He and Mira followed them into a small encampment hidden between the rocks. There were 5 people there in total, 2 men, 2 women, and a teenage boy. They had tents made from old tarps and a small fire burning at the center. Myra's eyes widened as she saw them. There really are others. The woman smiled at her. Yes, little one. There are still good people left. They shared what food they had, boiled roots, dried berries, and clean water. Aiden could barely remember the last time he had eaten so well. The warmth of the fire, the sound of laughter, it felt almost like life before everything ended. The man named Elias studied Aiden carefully. You've come from the south, haven't you? Yes, Aiden said. The cities are gone. Nothing but ruins and ash. Elias nodded grimly. We thought as much. The air's better here. A few of us settled and started growing what little crops we could. But the soil's weak. We've been searching for seeds, anything that might grow again. Mira looked up suddenly. I have one, she said. Everyone turned toward her. She held out the small metal canister. It's a seed. My mother said it can grow if it finds sunlight. Elias's eyes widened. A seed from before the fires? Yes, Mira said proudly. It's the last one. Aiden watched as the group exchanged astonished glances. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Maybe, she whispered, maybe the world isn't done after all. Aiden looked down at Mira and smiled. For the first time, he saw her not just as a child, but as a symbol of something bigger, hope itself. That night, under the cleanest sky they'd seen in months, Aiden sat by the fire with the others. He looked at Mira sleeping peacefully beside the canister, the flames reflecting off her face. He thought of all they had endured, the hunger, the fear, the endless walking, and realized it had all led here. The next morning they would plant the seed. And maybe, just maybe, it would grow. The morning came with a light that seemed almost golden. For the first time in a long while, the air felt different, cleaner, softer, filled with the faint scent of damp soil and smoke from the campfire. Aiden opened his eyes slowly, blinking at the sight of sunlight slipping through the mountain peaks. It wasn't bright, not like before the world fell apart, but it was enough to warm his face. Enough to make him believe again. Mira was already awake, sitting near the fire with the metal canister in her hands. She looked at it the way someone might look at a treasure, her small fingers tracing the scratches on its surface. Is it time? She asked as Aiden approached. He smiled gently.
Yes.
It's time. Elias, the old man who had first found them, stood beside a patch of soil near the edge of the valley. The others had cleared the rocks and loosened the earth. It wasn't much, just a small space, but it was enough for hope to take root. The group gathered around as Mira knelt beside the soil. She looked nervous but determined. "Mama said this seed needs sunlight and love," she whispered. "And that one day, it will grow tall enough to touch the sky." Aiden knelt beside her. "Then let's give it what it needs." Carefully, Mira unscrewed the cap of the canister and poured the seed into her palm. It was small and brown, unremarkable to look at, yet every eye was fixed on it as if it were a miracle. She pressed it gently into the earth and covered it with her tiny hands. "Goodbye," she murmured, "and hello." For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind moved softly through the valley, carrying the scent of rain and life. Then Aiden said quietly, "Now we wait." Days passed. The seed became the center of the camp's world. Every morning, someone checked the soil, watered it, and cleared away stones. Mira talked to it as if it could hear her, telling it stories about her mother, about the world before the fires, about her dream of seeing green fields again. At night, they sat around the fire, sharing stories and laughter. For the first time since the war, Aiden heard people laugh without fear. He helped repair shelters, hunted small animals, and gathered roots for food. Slowly, he felt something inside him begin to heal. The mountains shielded them from the worst of the wind, and the valley's stream provided clean water. Elias called it a gift. The others called it luck. But Aiden began to think it was something more. Maybe fate had led them here. On the 7th morning, Mira let out a cry of joy. "Aiden, come quick." He ran to her side and froze. A small green sprout had broken through the soil, fragile yet alive, its tiny leaves reaching upward toward the faint sunlight. It was the first true green Aiden had seen in years. "It's growing," Mira whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "It really is." Aiden knelt beside her, feeling an ache in his chest, a good ache, the kind that comes when hope feels real again. "You did it, Mira," he said softly. "Your mother would be proud." The others gathered around, smiling, some even crying quietly. Elias placed a hand on Aiden's shoulder.
"It's a beginning," he said.
"The first in a long time." The weeks that followed brought change. The air grew warmer, the sun lingered a little longer each day, and small patches of green began to appear across the valley. The group started planting more seeds, old ones they had saved, and new ones that began to sprout around the first plant. Life was returning, one leaf at a time. Aiden and Mira became part of the community. She helped tend the soil, and he built shelters, tools, and a small watchtower on the ridge. Every evening, they watched the sun sink behind the peaks, and though it still glowed red and dim, it no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a promise. One evening, as the sky burned with orange and purple light, Mira sat beside Aiden on the ridge. "Do you think the world will ever be the same again?" she asked. Aiden shook his head slowly.
"No," he said.
"But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we can build something better." Mira looked thoughtful. "Do you think the sun's still angry at us?" He smiled faintly.
"No.
I think it was waiting for people who still remember how to care." She looked at the growing plant below, now taller and stronger, its leaves swaying gently in the wind. "Then we'll make it happy again." Aiden watched her, the faint light of sunset reflecting in her eyes. "Yes," he said softly. "We will." Months passed. The small green valley became a haven. More survivors arrived, drawn by rumors of sunlight and growth. They brought stories of endless darkness beyond the mountains, of despair and ruin. But when they saw the sprout, now a young tree reaching proudly toward the sky, they wept. It was proof that the world could still live. Mira became a symbol among them. They called her the girl with the seed, a reminder that even the smallest hope could save the world. And Aiden, once lost and broken, became their protector and guide. One evening, as the community gathered around the fire, the sky blazed with colors brighter than anyone had seen in years. The clouds had parted, and the sun, full and radiant, poured golden light over the mountains. It was the most beautiful sunset Aiden had ever seen. He stood quietly beside Mira as she looked up, her face glowing in the light. "It's the last sunset," she said softly. He turned to her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "Mama said that when the world begins again, the last sunset becomes the first dawn." Aiden looked at the horizon. The fiery glow began to fade, replaced by a rising band of soft, clear light, the beginning of a new morning. He felt tears sting his eyes, but he didn't hide them. "You're right," he whispered. "It's not the end. It's the beginning." The people around them watched in silence as the first true sunrise in years broke across the sky, washing the valley in gold. The little trees' leaves shimmered like tiny stars. The world, once dead, was breathing again. Aiden took a deep breath of the clean air and looked down at Mira. "We made it," he said. She nodded, her smile bright as the light around them. "We kept the promise." And together, they stood watching the dawn of a new world, a world born from ashes, held together by the courage of the few who dared to hope. The last sunset had passed, and with it, life began again.